They say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. But in America, some people are judged before they even speak, before they act, before they're seen as human. Sometimes all it takes is a hoodie pulled over your head on a rainy night, a hoodie that keeps you warm but makes the world assume you're dangerous. This is the story of one such night, of a black woman driving home, calm, composed, a decorated military officer who's seen combat, negotiated in foreign war zones, led teams through chaos, but still wasn't safe in her own country. Because to one deputy, she was just another black face in the dark, just another woman in a hoodie. And that was enough. This story isn't fiction. It's not exaggerated. And it's not rare. It's real. And it's what happens when authority becomes arrogance, when power goes unchecked, when silence is mistaken for weakness, and a system forgets who it's supposed to protect. But what they didn't see coming was who she really was, and what happens when you try to bury the truth, and it decides to rise anyway. This isn't just a story about one arrest. It's about dignity. It's about quiet resistance. It's about stillness that stares injustice in the face and never blinks. In the next few minutes, you're going to witness a journey from humiliation to redemption, from silence to impact. And when it's over, you'll understand why behind every hoodie, there's a black story worth telling. Because sometimes power doesn't shout. Sometimes it walks. It was 11:17 p.m. when the storm started to let up. A soft drizzle still tapped Ped against the windshield of a silver Honda Civic as it rolled quietly down a lonely stretch of Highway 19, cutting through the outskirts of Sycamore County, Georgia. The pavement shimmered under the glow of orange streetlights, each puddle reflecting a distorted world. Inside the car, Serena Cole, 36, exhaled through her nose. Not from fear, not even frustration, just fatigue. She'd spent the last 12 hours inside a concrete bunker buried beneath Fort Linton, the military base that didn't officially exist on any public record. The job was classified, high stakes, and mind-numbing. Surveillance analysis, intel validation, cybersecurity reports. It never ended. Tonight, her job was done. But the shift from war room to rural highway came with its own risks, and none of those were listed in her clearance packet. She wore no uniform, no name tag, no insignia. Just a charcoal hoodie, sleeves pushed up to the elbows, paired with worn jeans and running shoes. Her hair was pulled back in a tight, low bun, neat, functional, forgettable. She looked like anyone, which was exactly the point. Because in towns like Sycamore, towns too small to be suspicious, but just big enough to act like they were, invisibility was armor. A lo-fi jazz station murmured through the speakers. Miles Davis, maybe, or Coltrane. She couldn't tell anymore. The volume was low, her thoughts louder. Every few seconds, her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. A habit, not paranoia. Training. You survive the things she had, and you learn that the world doesn't always give warnings. Sometimes, it just arrives. The highway was mostly empty, a few distant taillights, one semi-truck up ahead, then a pair of headlights behind her. She noticed them because they were steady, too close. Her gut tightened. A second later, red and blue lights bloomed in her mirror. Of course, she didn't flinch, didn't curse, just sighed. Serena slowed down, eased onto the shoulder, and put the car in park. Hands at 10 and 2, radio off, dome light on. A long breath in, hold outside. Another car might have driven by, or maybe not. Time blurred when you were trying to guess what kind of officer would step out that door. She knew what this looked like. A black woman in a hoodie, alone at night, in a mid-sized sedan. No uniform, no badge, no rank. Just a shadow waiting to be dismissed. The white patrol car idled behind her for longer than necessary. She counted the seconds. 15, 20, 32. Then the door opened. Deputy Ray Miller, white, 6'2", heavy-set, boots that clapped too hard against the wet pavement, walked slowly to her driver's side window. One hand on his hip, the other gripping a flashlight. No smile, no hello, no context. The flashlight clicked on, beam aimed directly into her eyes. "License and registration," he barked. Serena nodded once deliberately. She rolled the window down 3 inches. No more. Every movement rehearsed, controlled. "I'm reaching for my glove compartment," she said clearly, her voice calm and level. No answer. Just that light, that stare. She moved slowly, retrieved the documents, and handed them out the window. The flashlight moved to her papers, to her face, back to the papers. Still no introduction, still no explanation. "Was I speeding?" she asked gently. "Tail lights out," he said flatly. She blinked. "That can't be. You arguing with me?" The flashlight tilted. His voice had shifted. Less officer, more challenge. She knew that tone, the one that asked you to push back, just so it could punish you for doing it. She exhaled. "I had it checked last week, but I'll get it fixed." He stepped back. "Step out of the car." There it was, the escalation. She paused. "I'd feel safer if you told me the reason for that request, Deputy." He smirked. "Because I said so." The words floated in the air, thick with the weight of power unchecked. She unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the door, stepped out. The night was colder than she expected. The rain had stopped, but the dampness clung to her skin. She stood tall, not defiant, not submissive, just there, present. Miller circled her vehicle, flashlight scanning every surface. His boots scuffed deliberately against the pavement, the performance of suspicion. She said nothing. He came back around, stood in front of her, too close. "Turn around, hands on the hood." "Am I being detained?" "You resisting." "Number I'm asking." He didn't respond, just reached for his radio and muttered into it. "Possible non-compliant, running check." She stared straight ahead. There were no witnesses, no dash cams, no body cam blinking on his chest. Just them. She slowly turned, placed her palms on the hood of her Civic. The metal was cold, slick. Miller cuffed her wrists, too tight, on purpose. She winced but said nothing. "You people always have something to say," he muttered, yanking her arms. She didn't ask what he meant. She knew. He shoved her into the back seat of the cruiser, plastic, hard, cold. As he closed the door, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the glass. Eyes forward, face steady, breathing even. She'd been in war zones, in hostile briefings overseas, but this felt more personal. He slid into the front seat, radio squawking low. He didn't look back. "You know," he said after a pause, adjusting the rear view to see her eyes, "most people just do what I say. But you thought you were smarter." She met his gaze, calm. "I didn't think anything. I knew what my rights were." He chuckled. "You really think that matters out here?" She didn't answer. They drove in silence. Trees blurred past the window. He turned into the county station. Small, old. One floodlight flickering above the entrance. He parked, got out, opened her door without a word. Let her inside. The booking area smelled like bleach and boredom. Yellow walls, cracked tiles, a tired deputy behind the desk. No one looked up. Miller signed her in. No charges listed, no report, just non-compliance. They fingerprinted her, took a mugshot, escorted her past the holding cells. Then, without even loosening the cuffs, Miller shoved her into an empty cell. She stumbled, caught herself, turned slowly as the bars slid shut. He stood outside watching her, arms crossed, smug. "No one's coming," he said. She sat on the cold bench. "You're right," she replied. "No one's coming." Pause. "They're already here." His brow furrowed. She didn't explain. Didn't need to, because she knew what came next. She leaned back against the wall, cuffs still digging into her wrists, and closed her eyes. Not to sleep, to prepare. Because the most dangerous person in the room wasn't the one holding the keys, it was the one in the hoodie, waiting in silence. Morning in Sycamore County arrived slowly, dragging the weight of the previous night behind it. At 6:08 a.m., the cells inside the county jail clattered open for shift change. New deputies came in, smelling of stale coffee and drugstore cologne. Old ones left without saying much. Just another Tuesday, just another quiet southern town where not much happened, unless you were wearing the wrong thing, with the wrong skin, at the wrong hour. Serena Cole hadn't slept, not from fear, not even discomfort, just calculation. She sat on the cold metal bench inside cell 3, spine straight, hands resting on her lap. The red marks on her wrists had faded into angry outlines, but she didn't rub them. Pain had its place, and now wasn't it? From outside the cell, she could hear boots, the shuffle of lazy conversation, the clang of a coffee mug being set down too hard, a radio chattering about a car fire 2 counties over. Background noise, nothing urgent. Not yet. Then she heard his voice. Deputy Ray Miller. He was bragging, loud enough to be overheard. "Pulled over some lady last night. Thought she was slick. Smart mouth, you know the type." Another deputy snorted. "One of those?" "Yeah. Hoodie, late at night, didn't even want to answer questions. Had to bring her in. Probably calls herself an activist or some crap." They laughed. Serena didn't move. She just blinked once, slowly. On the outside, calm. On the inside, Cole started glowing. Not with rage, with clarity. Because this was the first strike, and she was watching it land. At 7:21 a.m., a call came into the jail's front desk. The receptionist answered without thinking. "Sycamore County Sheriff's Office?" A pause, then her tone changed. "Yes, sir, one moment." She scrambled for her supervisor. We just got a call from someone at the Pentagon. They're asking why one of their officers is in our system." Confusion spread like smoke. By 7:35 a.m., the sheriff was out of his office, red-faced and sweating. He stormed into the booking area with a file in one hand and his cell phone clutched in the other. "Where is she?" he demanded. "In holding," someone muttered. "Jesus Christ, get her out of there. Now!" Serena was released without apology. No explanation, no paperwork, no charges. Just a folded copy of her ID and a half-hearted, "You're free to go," from a deputy who couldn't even look her in the eye. She didn't speak, didn't yell, didn't demand. She just walked out. But she wasn't alone, because the story was already walking with her. By 9 a.m., emails had hit inboxes across military legal offices. By 10 a.m., a lawyer had already filed a preliminary complaint. By noon, someone had leaked the body cam footage request to local press. And by 2:30 p.m., Deputy Miller received a phone call that would rattle his smug little world. Internal Affairs needs to speak with you, his supervisor said. About what? About your traffic stop last night, the one that resulted in the unlawful detention of a U.S. military officer with top-secret clearance. Miller laughed. No way. That woman? In a hoodie? Come on. But no one laughed with him. That was the moment something shifted. He wasn't telling the story anymore. The story was telling itself. That evening, Serena sat across from her attorney, Ava Morales, a civil rights bulldog from Atlanta who had seen more courtroom injustice than most judges ever would. Ava tapped her pen against the desk. Let me be blunt. You were profiled, detained without probable cause, and processed without charge. If that deputy didn't violate at least 3 constitutional protections, I'll eat my law degree. Serena didn't react. I'm not looking for a payout. Ava smirked. Good, because we're not asking. We're demanding. She slid a thick folder across the desk. Internal complaint filed, civil suit pending, press contacts ready to move. We already have 3 local reporters sniffing around the footage. Serena raised an eyebrow. It hasn't even been released yet. Ava smiled, tight and dangerous. Not yet, but it will be. Online, the storm had begun to brew. Someone, maybe a clerk, maybe a bystander, had snapped a photo of Serena leaving the jail. The image wasn't flattering. Her hoodie was damp. Her eyes were tired. But her posture, that's what caught fire. Back straight, head high, walking like someone who just returned from war, not captivity. Within 12 hours, the post had over 60,000 shares. The caption read, "Arrested for a broken taillight, released without charges. Turns out she's a decorated military officer. Welcome to America." Hashtags followed: Hoodie Justice, Black Stories Matter, Wrong Woman Right Fight. By the time the sheriff's department held their half-hearted press conference, the damage was done. Deputy Miller stood behind his boss, face tight, eyes darting. He didn't speak. The sheriff fumbled through a non-apology. There may have been procedural missteps. We're reviewing protocol, committed to fairness. No one believed a word of it, because the internet had seen enough. And the story, the real story, was already writing itself. That night, Serena sat alone in her living room, still wearing the same hoodie. It had dried stiff. The cuff still ached from where the metal bit into her wrists. Her phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. You don't know me, but my daughter wears hoodies too. Thank you for not backing down. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because this wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. And sometimes truth doesn't need a spotlight. It just needs to survive long enough to be seen. She reached for the remote, turned off the lamp. Outside, the streetlight flickered. Inside, a quiet resolve settled in. The first strike had landed. But the war, that was just beginning. Public humiliation doesn't always come with a crowd. Sometimes it starts with a whisper, a rumor, a lie shared just enough times that it begins to sound like truth. When Serena Cole walked out of that jail, she thought the worst was behind her. No charges, no sentence, just a night in a cold cell. But outside the bars, a different kind of prison was already being built, with pixels, with headlines, with half-truths and hate. It began before the sun came up. A Facebook group called Sycamore Neighbors United. A grainy night photo. Two blurred figures in the rain. One in uniform, one in a hoodie. The caption? Saw this last night. Another troublemaker probably. Can't trust these folks after dark. There was no name, no story, but the comments filled in the blanks. Should have listened to the cop. Always playing the victim card. Hoodie says it all. They didn't know she was military. They didn't care she was innocent. They saw skin. They saw cloth. They made a story, and it spread. By 9 a.m., someone, no one knows who, posted a screenshot of the jail roster. Name, Serena Cole. Status, booked, no charges listed. That only added fuel. If she didn't do anything, why was she arrested? Bet she resisted. They always resist. Should have stayed quiet and stayed home. Serena hadn't opened her phone yet. She didn't know what was happening. She was focused on her job, her life, her lawyer. She was preparing for justice. But the world had moved on to judgment. By noon, a local blogger known for backing the badge posted an article, From Navy to Nuisance? Who is Serena Cole? No sources, no facts, just screenshots, speculation, and a video clip of someone else being arrested. Another woman, another state, another story. But she wore a hoodie, so it was close enough. The headline caught fire, and once it was lit, the flames didn't stop. At 1:37 p.m., Serena arrived at Fort Linton. The guard at the gate was new. He scanned her ID. Twice. Then called a number she couldn't hear. He came back, eyes unsure. Ma'am, you've been flagged. Command needs to review clearance. Flagged. No reason. No explanation. She wasn't a suspect. She was a symbol. Meanwhile, back at the sheriff's office, Deputy Ray Miller was already feeling the heat. Internal Affairs had started asking questions about the stop, about the missing footage, about the inconsistencies in his report. He tried to stay calm. She was mouthy. She hesitated. She challenged my authority. But each word he said only made it worse. The officers interviewing him didn't nod. They didn't smile. They wrote. Back online, the tide began to turn. A woman named Carla Jansen posted a photo. Serena, in full dress blues, saluting the flag on Memorial Day. The caption read, "This is the thug you were all laughing at. This is my friend. This is a hero." It went viral. Suddenly, the hoodie wasn't hiding anything. It was protecting something. Dignity, service, truth. At 6 p.m., the local news caught on. WPKT Channel 5 aired the headline, Military Officer Detained Without Charge, Community Reacts. They showed Serena walking out of the jail, straight-backed, silent, powerful. They showed protesters beginning to gather, small at first and then bigger. No shouting, no looting, just hoodies and candles and signs that read, "Her silence says more than your badge ever could." Not just a hoodie, not just a black woman, a soldier. The system picked the wrong one. Ray Miller tried to fight back. He gave a podcast interview thinking it would defend him. Instead, he gave them a soundbite that exploded. "I didn't know who she was. Just another smart-mouth woman in a hoodie." That sentence, it became the title of 1,000 posts. It was printed on T-shirts, graffitied on downtown walls, painted into murals of Serena's face. Calm, hooded, unbroken. Just another woman in a hoodie. And somehow that phrase became the anthem of everyone who'd ever been underestimated. At Fort Linton, Serena was called into the commander's office. The man behind the desk didn't waste words. "Your clearance is reinstated. We've reviewed everything." He paused, then added, "You didn't ask for this fight, but you stood tall in it." Serena nodded once. "I didn't start it, but I won't let it go unanswered." Later that night, she sat in her living room, laptop open, inbox flooded, hundreds of messages and then thousands, some angry, most grateful. One from a 17-year-old girl in Ohio. "I wore my hoodie to school today for the first time in months, and I didn't feel ashamed. 'Cause I saw you." Another from a mother in Texas. "My son asked why people were scared of hoodies. I showed him your story. And now he wants to be like you." Serena bookmarked that one and closed the screen. Meanwhile, the sheriff's office released a weak statement. "We are conducting a review of procedures. We strive to serve our community with integrity. We thank the public for their patience." No apology, no acknowledgement, no accountability. But the silence around that was louder than any confession. Back on the streets of Sycamore, something began to shift. At the high school, teachers brought in speakers, veterans, lawyers, civil rights advocates. They didn't name names, but everyone knew the subject. At the community center, a mural of Serena began to form. Each brick painted by a different hand, each stroke a part of the story. No slogan, no label, just her image. Hood up, eyes steady, power wrapped in silence. Serena didn't do a press tour, didn't go viral on purpose, didn't cash in. She just showed up. To court, to work, to her life. And that was more powerful than any speech. Because she didn't fight to win headlines. She fought to hold on to her name. The world tried to shame her. They pointed at her hoodie, her silence, her skin. But all they really revealed was their fear of a woman who didn't flinch, of a story they couldn't control, of a hoodie that stood for more than comfort. It stood for resistance, for dignity, for quiet power. And when the world saw Serena walk through that fire and not burn, they knew the truth. She was never just a woman in a hoodie. She was a warrior, and she was just getting started. The line wasn't crossed when he pulled her over. It wasn't crossed when he cuffed her. It wasn't even when he locked her in a cell without charges. That was routine. That was what Serena Cole had trained herself to endure. But the real line, the one that should never be crossed, was the one they tried to erase, the one between truth and lies, between justice and spin. It was crossed the moment the system tried to make her disappear. It started quietly. 3 days after the arrest, her lawyer Ava received a reply to the formal complaint they had filed. It was short, too short, a 3-paragraph dismissal from the Sycamore County Sheriff's Office Internal Review Board. "We have found no evidence of misconduct. Deputy Ray Miller acted in accordance with department procedure. Case closed." No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement. Ava read the letter 3 times. Serena read it once, then folded it and set it aside. "I expected that," she said flatly. Ava slammed her fist onto the desk. "He arrested you with no probable cause. He never read your rights. His body cam was off. There's no dash cam record. And we have a witness statement from a desk sergeant saying you never resisted." Serena didn't blink. They're not trying to justify it. They're trying to ignore it. And so they escalated. Ava took the documentation to state media first, an Atlanta-based investigative news outlet. They weren't flashy. They weren't clickbait. They were dangerous in the best way. They told the truth. The article dropped 2 days later. Decorated black officer detained without cause. Sheriff's office refuses accountability. It included everything: the incident timeline, a side-by-side comparison of department procedure, Serena's military record, a photo of her leaving the jail, and most notably, an audio clip from the podcast where Deputy Miller said, "I didn't know who she was. Just another smart-mouth woman in a hoodie." That quote lit the fuse again. The story exploded across Twitter, then Instagram, then YouTube. Not just a hoodie. Serena Cole, justice in uniform. She served, you arrested. Veterans reposted it. Civil rights lawyers broke it down frame by frame. And within 48 hours, 2 new calls came in. One from the Department of Justice, the other from the governor's office. Governor Alan Mace was no stranger to controversy. Known for back-the-badge policies, he rarely, if ever, intervened in local enforcement issues. But this one had grown too big, too loud, too undeniable. "The footage is disturbing," he said at a press briefing. "We're calling for an independent investigation into the conduct of the Sycamore County Sheriff's Department." When asked whether Deputy Miller would be placed on leave, he paused. "We're not here to protect individuals. We're here to protect the people." It was political, it was calculated, but it was also pressure. And pressure breaks things. At the sheriff's department, things cracked fast. The sheriff held a closed-door meeting. No press, just panic. Miller was called in. This time, he wasn't smug. This time, he looked tired, nervous. He was told to surrender his badge and firearm pending investigation. "I followed protocol," he insisted. "I had reason." She had an attitude. She looked hostile. They stared back in silence. The sheriff didn't defend him, because this time, defending Miller meant sinking the whole ship. Meanwhile, Ava filed the civil suit. $10 million, unlawful arrest, racial profiling, emotional distress, malicious conduct, violation of constitutional rights. It wasn't about the money, it was about record, reckoning, recognition. Serena didn't speak to the press, didn't post, didn't clap back. She went to work, filed paperwork, prepared for depositions, read witness transcripts. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was systemic, and systems don't change unless someone forces the gears to stop. On the courthouse steps, the people gathered. Again. Only this time, they didn't just wear hoodies, they wore uniforms, fatigues, pins, medals. An entire row of veterans stood shoulder to shoulder, and in the middle, a 12-year-old girl held a sign. "They tried to lock up my hero, but heroes don't stay quiet." The photo hit Time magazine. Inside, the case gained momentum. Depositions revealed inconsistencies in Miller's past arrests. A pattern. Stops involving black drivers. No citations. No reports. Just arrests that disappeared in paperwork. One name came up again, then another. A young man named Terrell who had been arrested the year before. No charges, no lawyer, no press. He'd spent 2 nights in jail. He showed up to the hearing, shaking, but he looked Serena in the eye and said, "I didn't think anyone would ever believe me. But then I saw you on TV." Serena nodded. That was enough. The sheriff resigned quietly. No press conference, just a one-line email to the board. Effective immediately. A special election was called. New leadership promised transparency, promised reform. We've heard that before. But this time, they added something else. And accountability begins now. As for Ray Miller, He was charged. Misconduct in office, tampering with evidence, civil rights violations. His defense, ignorance, stress, split-second decisions. But the jury watched the dash cam. They heard the audio. They saw the pattern. And when they asked Serena to speak, she didn't speak about herself. She spoke about Tyrell, about the little girl with the sign, about her own niece who asked if she could still wear her hoodie to school. And she ended with this: power unchecked becomes power abused. And if the law only protects the loudest badge in the room, then it's not justice, it's branding. The jury deliberated 4 hours. The verdict: guilty. He lost his badge, his pension, his shield. But Serena never asked for vengeance. She only asked for change. And this was the beginning. Outside the courtroom, Ava handed her the final paperwork. Settlement closed, civil suit complete, government review launched. Serena folded the pages and placed them in her bag. A reporter called out, "Commander Cole, any final thoughts?" She stopped, turned, looked straight into the lens and said, "This story isn't mine anymore. It's everyone's who ever got stopped for existing. And now that the system listened, we make it answer." Then she walked away. The crowd parted. The hoodie stayed on. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who hasn't spoken yet. They don't raise their voice, they don't flex muscle, they don't threaten. They wait, and when the time comes, they don't strike. They dismantle, piece by piece. That person was Serena Cole's father. His name wasn't in the papers. He didn't post online. He didn't give interviews. But when he finally made his move, it shook every office from City Hall to D.C. His name was Langston Cole, retired Master Sergeant, decorated military strategist, and Serena's father, the man who had taught her to fight, not with fists, but with presence. Langston had been watching from the shadows. He hadn't intervened when she was arrested, or when they dragged her name through headlines, or when the system gaslit her with paperwork, because he knew his daughter. He knew she had it under control. But when Deputy Miller walked out of the courtroom, freed on bail, flashing that same smug smile, Langston decided it was time. It began with a letter, a single envelope hand-delivered to the office of the Inspector General. No lawyer, no team, just Langston's signature. The contents: a detailed 19-page report, cross-referencing federal oversight failures, inconsistencies in use of force protocols, patterns of suppression across 4 Georgia counties, including Sycamore. Attached were transcripts, dates, badge numbers, redacted memos, all gathered over the course of 2 years, not just for Serena, but for every Black service member falsely detained in the last decade. Langston had been collecting, quietly and methodically, like a soldier plans a siege. The Inspector General's office responded within 48 hours. They requested a formal interview. Langston refused. "I don't need to talk," he said. "I just need you to read." By the end of the week, an independent commission was announced. And this time, it wasn't about one deputy. It was about the entire system. While headlines raged and networks speculated, Langston paid a visit to the man who had started it all. Ray Miller. The former deputy was out on bail, staying at his brother's house just outside of Macon. Langston didn't knock with anger. He didn't come with rage. He came with a question. "Do you even remember her name?" Ray flinched, didn't answer. Langston stared at him. "You looked at my daughter and saw a threat. You saw skin, hoodie, attitude. But what you didn't see was who taught her to stand tall. A long pause. You thought that badge made you untouchable. It didn't. It made you accountable. Then Langston turned and left. He didn't need to stay. The point had landed. In D.C., a hearing was scheduled. Senate Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Law Enforcement Oversight. And for the first time, Serena Cole was asked to testify. She hesitated, not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want her pain to become spectacle. Langston spoke first. He sat at the witness table, back straight, hands folded, voice low. My daughter wore a hoodie because it was raining, but people didn't see rain. They saw threat. And that perception, that failure, nearly cost her her life, her career, her dignity. He paused, but she's not the first, and she won't be the last. Unless you decide to make the law mean something again. The room was silent. No senator blinked. And then Serena stepped forward. She wore a blazer, and underneath it, that same charcoal hoodie. No slogans, no patches, just fabric and truth. Her testimony was quiet, clear, undeniable. She spoke of what it meant to serve, only to be seen as a suspect, of what it meant to comply and still be cuffed, of what it felt like to sit in a jail cell while the man who put her there laughed down the hallway. She ended with this: I didn't come here to be a symbol. I came here because someone has to draw the line and make sure it doesn't get crossed again. Applause wasn't allowed, but it happened anyway. After that day, things moved fast. A national directive was issued requiring body cam activation audits, implicit bias retraining for rural departments, Department of Justice oversight expansion and use of force reviews. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And sometimes, something is how revolutions begin. Langston never took credit. He declined every interview. But one night, weeks later, as Serena poured him tea, she looked at him across the kitchen table. Why now? She asked. Why step in? Langston looked up, calm. Because I taught you to fight smart, and you did, but I also taught you no warrior fights alone forever. Serena nodded. I never felt alone. Good, he said. That means I did my job. Meanwhile, Ray Miller was formally disqualified from law enforcement service nationwide. His certification revoked. His name added to a national misconduct registry. His mugshot made rounds. But Serena didn't share it, didn't repost it, didn't mock it, because justice isn't about humiliation, it's about clarity. And clarity is finally what she had. Langston returned to his quiet home outside Savannah, spent his days restoring old radios, volunteering at a youth center. He never bragged. But if you asked any of the kids there who he was, they'd say, that's Mr. Cole. He teaches us how to walk straight, even when the world pushes sideways. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it waits, in silence, in patience, in the steady hands of those who've carried too much for too long. Langston Cole didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to, because when shadows move, the world notices. And when a father stands up, the system has no choice but to sit down. Some men don't fall all at once. They break in pieces, quietly, publicly, like statues cracked at the base, still standing for a while, until gravity finishes the job. Ray Miller didn't fall in one day, but the day his name hit the federal misconduct registry, the fall began. It started with a knock at his door. 3 men in suits, no press, no warning. They handed him a letter from the U.S. Department of Justice. You are officially under federal review for civil rights violations, per Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code. The words didn't register at first. He blinked, then scoffed. This is political. You people are just... Mr. Miller, one agent said calmly, you're no longer a police officer. You're a citizen under investigation. And with that, the door shut, and the world got quieter. He tried to fight it at first, tried calling the union, tried calling old colleagues, but the calls went unanswered. The texts were left on read. He was radioactive now. No sheriff would take him. No department would defend him. The badge he once wore, like armor, had become a scarlet letter. The media called his fall swift. It wasn't. It was humiliating. First came the review board announcement. Deputy Miller failed to uphold departmental standards. His conduct represents a breach of public trust. Then came the job loss, dismissed without pension. Then the pension board decision, emergency vote, all benefits revoked. His entire career gone. 23 years on the force, reduced to a paragraph in a press release. But the worst part, the town. Sycamore wasn't a city where people forgot. It was a place where people whispered in supermarkets, where every glance was a question, where every silence felt like judgment. Ray couldn't go anywhere. Not the grocery store, not the barbershop, not the gas station. People who used to smile at him now crossed the street. The same people who cheered his name when he kept things in line now avoided eye contact like he was a ghost. His brother asked him to move out. Too much heat, he said. His ex-wife blocked his number, said their teenage son didn't want to see him anymore. He saw the video, she said. He's ashamed. That hit hardest because deep down, Ray Miller didn't see himself as the villain. He saw himself as a man doing his job. But that's how so many monsters start. Not with malice, but with certainty. The local newspaper published an op-ed titled, "The Man Who Thought the Law Was His Shield." It broke down every case Miller had been part of. Disparities, complaints, patterns of silence. And at the end, the journalist asked one question: how many stories didn't have a Serena Cole to fight back? That one line echoed louder than any verdict. Meanwhile, Serena wasn't focused on revenge. She was rebuilding, quietly. She'd been offered book deals, speaking engagements, even a Netflix docu-series. She said no to all of it. I'm not interested in selling the trauma. Instead, she began working with a coalition of veterans and civil rights lawyers, helping design policy that would prevent what happened to her from happening to others. She called it the First Look Project because, as she said, the first look someone gives you shouldn't be your death sentence. Back in Sycamore, a new sheriff was elected. A black woman, veteran, no nonsense. First order of business: implement full body cam protocols, create a civilian oversight board, and reopen cold cases linked to racial profiling. The town that once turned its back on Serena now held her up as a symbol of what could change. But she didn't want statues. She wanted structure. Don't build me a mural, she said. Build me a system that works. Ray tried applying for security jobs, private patrol, neighborhood watch, even mall cop work. But every application asked, have you ever been terminated for misconduct? And now he had to check yes. Every time he began to unravel, not with violence, but with silence. The man who once walked into every room like he owned it now looked at the floor when people spoke. He stopped shaving, stopped talking to friends, stopped leaving the house. Months passed. One afternoon, he drove past a school and saw a kid walking with a hoodie over his head. For a moment, something in him flinched, but the boy turned and smiled. Ray didn't smile back, because the smile reminded him of a truth he had spent years trying to deny. The people he feared were never the threat. He was. Eventually, he was called to court, not as an officer, not as a witness, but as a defendant in a federal civil rights case. He wore a wrinkled suit, no badge, no gun, no swagger. He looked older, smaller, and when the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he stood up slowly and said, "I thought I was in the right, but that's the problem. I stopped asking if I was wrong." It wasn't an apology, but it was honest. Maybe for the first time in his life, he was sentenced to probation, mandatory bias training, and was barred from holding any position in law enforcement again. Some said it was too light. Maybe it was. But sometimes the worst punishment is living with what you've become once the power's gone. Outside the courtroom, Serena stood waiting, not for him, for Ava. They exchanged nods. Ava said, "It's over." Serena shook her head. "Number, it's just beginning." Then she walked down the courthouse steps. No cameras, no speech, just her, hoodie on, back straight, because even when the villain falls, the story isn't about the fall, it's about the one who stood. There are two kinds of victories: the loud ones, with cameras, applause, speeches, headlines. And then there are the quiet ones, the kind that don't come with a spotlight, but leave a permanent glow. Serena Cole never raised her voice. She never cursed. She never snapped back. But she won. Not because she overpowered the system, but because she refused to be broken by it. That was the lesson. And people were finally ready to learn. It started small. An email from a professor at Georgia State University. "I'm teaching a course on ethics and law enforcement. We're using your case as a central study. Would you be open to joining a guest panel?" Then came another, from a high school civics teacher in Detroit. "My students are reading your story. Some of them wear hoodies too. They asked if I could thank you for not backing down." Then one more, from a mother in Kansas. "My daughter has autism. She wears a hoodie every day because it helps her feel safe. People judge her because of it, but now she tells them, if Serena wore it, I can too." Serena didn't expect any of this. She didn't go looking for recognition, but something had shifted. She could feel it in the way people looked at her, in the way communities started asking new questions, in the way departments were rewriting their training manuals. And none of it required a single brick to be thrown, just a woman who stood still long enough for the truth to catch up. Her lawyer, Ava, called late one evening. "I just got off the phone with a judge in North Carolina. He asked if you'd be willing to testify in a case involving wrongful detainment. Your testimony could shift precedent." Serena paused, then asked, "Does it matter?" Ava replied, "It matters more than you think." That became Serena's new mission. Not protest, not politics, precedent. She began speaking at closed-door hearings, helping committees draft legislation, consulting with departments on de-escalation tactics. She didn't shout, she didn't rant. She showed up with evidence, experience, and a calm that made even the most defensive officers lean forward and listen. Because when you've walked through fire in silence, people start to notice the heat you carry. One day she was invited to speak at a leadership summit at the Pentagon, a round table of officers, commanders, senators, advocates. She wore her uniform that day, not to impress, but to remind them that they almost erased someone like her, that sometimes the enemy isn't overseas, it's across the street. She stood before the room and said, "Don't train your officers to see threats. Train them to see people. If you keep policing fear, you'll always create what you claim to be fighting." The room went silent. Then came the first nod, then a second. Then they stood, not because they were told to, but because they understood something. Serena Cole wasn't an activist. She was a mirror, and the system had finally seen itself. Back in Sycamore, change had arrived. The new sheriff's policies had cut racial complaints in half. Body cam footage was reviewed weekly. Community liaisons were placed in every precinct. And a new program was launched, Hoodies and Heroes, designed to bring together youth and officers in shared spaces with shared stories. Serena was asked to speak at the first event. She almost declined, but then she met a boy named Marcus, 10 years old, shy, wore a hoodie with a cartoon dragon on the back. He walked up to her after the event and said, "My big cousin said you're like a superhero." She knelt to his height, smiled. "You don't need a cape to fight right." That night she wrote a letter to her niece, the same one who had asked months ago if it was still okay to wear her hoodie to school. Serena wrote, "Yes, baby girl. Wear it. Wear it proud. Wear it safe. Wear it smart. But never let the world make you think. What you wear makes you dangerous. It's how you carry yourself. That makes you powerful." She slipped the letter into an envelope. No hashtags and no headlines. Just truth, the kind that doesn't need trending to matter. Meanwhile, Ray Miller faded from the news. No new trials, no new stories. Just quiet. Sometimes the worst punishment isn't prison. It's living with the reflection of who you used to be, when everyone else knows what you really were. Ray was seen working at a hardware store in a neighboring county, no uniform, no badge, just him, and the fall that never stopped. A reporter once asked Serena, "What does justice look like to you?" She thought about it, then said, "Justice isn't about putting someone behind bars. It's about opening doors for someone else. I didn't win because he lost. I won because I walked out of that courtroom and didn't let it change who I am." Months passed, then a year, then two. The world moved on, as it always does. But here and there, echoes remained. A policy, a training video, a name mentioned during Senate debate, a girl in a hoodie walking down the street, without flinching when a patrol car drove by. That's the real legacy. Not fame, not fortune, but freedom. Serena never became a celebrity. She never wanted to be, but she became something stronger. A lesson, the kind that doesn't get forgotten, the kind that keeps getting told. Long after the headlines stop, because the hoodie didn't define her. Her stillness did. Her silence did. Her survival did. It was a Tuesday, quiet, gray, cloud-draped. The kind of morning that asked you to slow down, to listen, to notice things you usually rush past. Outside a community center in East Atlanta, a line of kids stood waiting to enter. Some fidgeted, some whispered, some adjusted the hoods on their sweatshirts. And then she stepped out of a dark blue SUV. No entourage, no camera crew, just her, Serena Cole, in jeans, sneakers, and the same hoodie from that night, the one that started it all. She walked past the security guard with a nod, held the door for two students, and made her way down a hallway lined with posters. On one of them, her face was printed in black and white. Underneath it, Silent Power, the woman who changed how we police ourselves. She stopped, stared at it for a second, then kept walking. Inside the auditorium, chairs squeaked as students settled in. A few whispered when they saw her enter. A girl in the second row whispered to her friend, "She's the one they arrested for nothing." Serena caught it, smiled, walked to the front, and waited. The moderator introduced her in two short lines. "Please welcome Lieutenant Commander Serena Cole. You know her story, but today she wants to hear yours." She stepped up. No podium, no slideshow. Just her and 120 pairs of eyes. "Most people know me for a story," she began, "but I'm not a story, I'm a person." She looked around the room. "Some of you wear hoodies, some of you wear anxieties, some of you wear anger. I wore silence." Pause. "But silence doesn't mean surrender. And what you wear doesn't define who you are. But it does shape how the world treats you." She let that breathe, then sat on the edge of the stage. Less lecture, more conversation. A boy in the back raised his hand. "Do you hate cops now?" Serena didn't flinch. "No," she said. "I hate systems that protect bad ones." Another student asked, "Why didn't you fight him back that night?" She smiled sadly. "Because if I had, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be mourning another what could have been." Afterward, they crowded around her, asked for selfies and asked for advice. One girl just asked for a hug. Another whispered, "They pulled my brother over last week. He didn't even do anything." Serena put a hand on her shoulder. "You tell him this. Stay alive, stay calm, and when the moment passes, speak up because we're finally listening." Later that day, she stopped by the cemetery. Her grandfather was buried there, a World War II vet, fought in a war for a country that refused to fight for him back. She sat by his headstone, pulled her hoodie up. "Let the wind speak first." Then she whispered, "I didn't disgrace the name, Grandpa. I carried it, and now it carries others too." She left a coin on the stone, a Navy tradition, then walked away. Head high, hoodie up, feet steady, because the journey wasn't over. The fight wasn't over, but the fear, that was long gone. 2 weeks later, she was honored by the Department of Justice. A private ceremony, small room, no media. Langston Cole, her father, stood beside her, silent, proud. They asked her to say a few words. She looked around the room, saw the officials, the judges, the senators, then said, "Justice isn't a medal, it's a responsibility. And if you're comfortable while others are struggling, then you're not doing it right." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. That weekend, Ava came by. They sat on Serena's porch drinking coffee. Ava stared at the street. "You ever gonna take that hoodie off?" Serena raised an eyebrow. "Why should I?" Ava laughed. "You made it a symbol." Serena sipped her coffee. "I didn't make it anything. They did. I just wore it anyway." That night, Serena went for a walk. No destination, just movement. She passed street lights, empty benches, a woman closing up a corner store. The city felt different now. Not safe, but seen. She passed a group of teenagers on a stoop. One of them called out, "Yo, Commander Cole." She turned, smiled. They all raised their hoods in salute. No words, just that small, perfect gesture. A hoodie, not of shame, but of pride. She kept walking. Headlights passed. A siren echoed far off in the distance. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Did you hear? Ray Miller moved out of state quietly. Serena typed back, figures, then put the phone away and walked on. Some people want their justice to be loud. Serena didn't. She wanted it to be lasting. She didn't need monuments. She needed policy. She didn't need sympathy. She needed consistency. And in that quiet walk, the sound of her shoes on pavement, the rustle of her hoodie in the wind, that was her victory song. No chorus, no hook. Just one woman, one life, still standing. The next day, the mayor's office called. We'd like to name a civic program after you. She paused. What kind? Youth mentorship for at-risk teens. We want to call it the Cole Initiative. She didn't answer right away, then asked, will it protect them when no one's watching? Will it teach them to stand up without getting shot down? A pause. That's the goal. Serena smiled. Then sure, just don't let it become a brand. Make it a bridge. Months passed, new laws, new stories, new fights, but one thing remained. Everywhere she went. Everywhere people had been hurt, ignored, profiled, they whispered her name. Not because she yelled it, but because she didn't. Because she made silence speak. Because she made stillness strong. Because she wore her hoodie, and never once let it define her worth. They thought her hoodie made her powerless. They thought her silence meant surrender. They thought she would fade away like so many before her. But they were wrong, because some people don't raise their voices. They raise their standards, they raise their impact. And when the world finally looked close enough, they didn't just see a hoodie, they saw the woman wearing it. And they couldn't look away. This was Serena Cole's story, but it's not just hers. It belongs to every person who's ever been profiled, dismissed, mocked, or threatened for what they wear, how they walk, or the color of their skin. It's for the young black girl in the back of the classroom, afraid to speak up because she's been taught that confidence is dangerous. It's for the boy on the bus with his headphones on, hood up, eyes down, praying he makes it home without being stopped. It's for the veteran whose service is forgotten. The moment he's pulled over on a quiet road at night. It's for all of them. It's for you. Because behind every hoodie is a story, sometimes loud, sometimes quiet, but always worth telling. So if this story moved you, if it made you pause, made you angry, made you proud, then don't let it end here. Share it. Talk about it. Let it ripple. Because change doesn't come from silence. It comes from truth. And truth needs a voice. Yours. Subscribe for more stories like Serena's. Stories that don't always make the news, but always deserve to be heard. Stories about strength, about dignity, about walking through fire and coming out whole. Turn on the bell so you don't miss what's next. Leave a comment, start a conversation, because every time we shine a light on a story like this, we make it harder for injustice to hide. And if you're someone walking through this world wearing a hoodie, know this, you're not invisible. You're not alone. You are powerful in ways they haven't even learned to measure yet. So keep walking, head high, heart steady, because behind every hoodie, there's a story, and we're here to tell it.